Hello everyone, so during this video we'll be making a new dinosaur called a Therizinosaurus, which was made popular by, well, the new Jurassic Park movie, obviously. So we're gonna turn all these art supplies into a Therizinosaurus.
Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well, and thank you for tuning into Moose Motion. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new, and be sure you have your post notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the new content. Anyway, thank you for your support, it's highly appreciated.
So we'll be going over a lot of interesting facts about the Therizinosaurus during the, well, making of the Therizinosaurus. So obviously there's going to be not a whole lot of tutorial on how to sculpt things here. However, there is text for you to follow along if you're curious on making your own Therizinosaurus. Alright, let's dive into some fun facts about this dinosaur. So, the Therizinosaurus, the giant claw or the reaping lizard, or also probably known as, well, the Edward Scissorhands of the dinosaur world. Possessing over 1 meter long claws, a gangly pot-bellied build, over 10 meters long and 7 meters high, and about 5 tons. It's only a few tons shy of, well, the T.Rex. To put this in perspective, it is as big as an elephant and as tall as a giraffe. Therizinosaurus was found in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia, where obviously the, well, climate back then was much different than it is now. Back then, it was basically a, well, thriving forest where it was obviously able to sustain giant, wild, weird, monster-like creatures. Its claws could have been up to 1.5 meters, and were the longest known claws of any living animal. To give those claws some perspective, well, the average human is about 1.77 meters tall. So their claws are basically just about as big as a person. So the first known specimen of Therizinosaurus was found in 1948 in Mongolia after the Cold War was in full swing. There was a team of, well, paleontologists that were out to basically retrieve the specimen of Therizinosaurus in the famous Mammoth Formation in the Gobi Desert. Now, this is probably the strangest fact of all. When this thing was first discovered, it was mistaken for a giant sea turtle. I mean, I understand that some of the old paleontology was, not the greatest, but in 1948, I think we should have maybe known a little better at that point. I would expect something from this in the early 1900s, not mid, but oh well, at least it's been solved since then. Because it's one of my personal favorite dinosaurs at this point because, well, it's a bit of a weirdo because, well, Spinosaurus is still my first favorite, I must admit. However, this is probably easy top 5 for sure because, well, it's a giant weird theropod that's an oviraptor with, like, claws as long as a human being. How is that not cool? Anyway, back to facts about how this thing was mistaken as a giant sea turtle. So the paleontologist who first discovered this thing, named Yevgeny Malev, God, that's a hard name to pronounce, I had to practice a few times. Anyway, he made a colossal blunder by, well, mistaking this thing as a giant 15-foot long marine sea turtle that possessed giant long claws for some reason. Now, some of the sources that I basically back-checked for this dinosaur, basically his point for this giant marine turtle for having these giant claws was to effectively scoop giant amount of seaweed into its mouth as it swam across the sea. Which, in retrospect, wasn't too far from the truth in the end. However, it's obviously quite far from a giant turtle. Yevgeny Malev even went as far as to basically make up an entire genus for the sea turtle called the Therizinosauridae to accommodate what he thought was an entire unique branch of Mongolian sea turtles. Now, the sad fact about all this, it took over 25 years for Therizinosaurus to get properly identified as an actual dinosaur. Now, it's not uncommon for a partial fossil specimen to basically be mistaken as something else, but it took about, well, 25 years till about 1970, around sometime then, it was discovered to be an actual theropod dinosaur. Now, the reason it got tagged as a theropod was due to the discovery of two, well, distant cousins of it, or relatives, named Signosaurus and Erlikosaurus, found from Asia, that it was finally tagged as a theropod dinosaur. Basically, a weird genus of theropod dinosaur that ate a bunch of plants, and some of them were thought to be omnivorous, because some of the species, I believe, were found, well, it is coprolite, I believe is what fossil poop is called, and some of those coprolite pieces found crab specimens in it, so it's thought to be, well, Therizinosaurus and close living relatives were slightly omnivorous. Now, they all shared a very similar appearance as well. Basically, a pea head on a very long neck, very long claws, strong arms, and a pot-belly stature. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about, well, Therizinosaurus' most unique feature, its 1.5 long meter claws. I mean, after all, they're the longest claws ever found on any known species of animal to this date, so how can you ignore them? But most of all, they are probably the longest and most durable claws out of all the Segnosaurs. However, there is one dinosaur that was pretty close that had claws almost as long, known as the Dinosaurus, or translated, the Terrible Hand. Or the Horrible Hand is another name I also found out that it could be, but with a lot of dinosaur names, it's actually pretty loose on a lot of translations. You can kind of get away with a lot because they're so complicated. Dinosaurus also had claws that were about 1 meter long, but it's also estimated that it could be up to 1.5 meters long. However, more specimens are in order to confirm that estimate. Now, it's important to remember these types of dinosaurs did not use their giant claws for ripping apart other dinosaurs or battling. I mean, I'm sure it did not hurt to have them in the case of a giant predator showing up. I'm pretty sure it would have been pretty intimidating to see this giant theropod with giant claws. I would probably be going for something a little bit easier if I was the giant carnivore at that point. However, scientists predict that the Therizinosaurus used these giant claws to basically pick down giant plants, because that's primarily what its diet consisted of. So basically, it used them like a giant sloth, just pulling down giant branches or trees to essentially get all the green good stuff. Therizinosaurus lived in the late Cretaceous period, approximately 100 million years ago to 66 million years ago, sharing its territory with other bird-like dinosaurs known as the Congoraptor and Aviemimus. Tyrannosaurs like the Aleoramus and Tarbosaurus, and giant titanosaurs like the Myrmectosaurus. Then, obviously, the Mongolian desert was much more thriving habitat, like I previously mentioned. Therizinosaurus may also have been covered in feathers. There's been obviously a few different adaptations for it in paleoart, where some has had feathers and some have not, given that most of the species that were in its area were, well, heavily feathered. I'm more or less on the side of it being feathered. However, I do believe there's no fossil evidence to actually prove this statement at this particular time. Therizinosaurus, well, in a confusing twist, made a mess of other dinosaurs' names and forced them to change it. What was once known as Segnosaurs a few decades ago is now known as Therizinosaurs. Therizinosaurs were thought to be restricted to, well, the late Cretaceous period in northern Asia, until the discovery of the North American Northronogus and Valcarius. Even today, I believe there's only 24 known species of this genera. Another interesting fact about Therizinosaurus, it actually shared its territory with Dinosaurus, oddly enough, which was, well, a very close resemblance to, well, Therizinosaurus, obviously. If you aren't curious, or by chance don't actually know what Dinosaurus looks like, or the horrible hand, be sure to check that out. He is very, very, very similar. However, to make things just a little bit more confusing, technically the dinosaur that it bears the most resemblance to, they're not related whatsoever. Technically, Dinosaurus is a ornithomimid, or a bird mimic. Now, Dinosaurus obviously had claws that were very, very similar in stature and length to Therizinosaurus, and it was also very similar in weight. I believe they were both actually in the same weight class. So that being said, it would definitely be very cool to see these two dinosaurs go at it, so that's probably a future stop motion project that I think I'd like to do. It is unknown whether or not these dinosaurs did actually battle, but if they did, well, let's not lie, it would have been pretty epic to see. Now, to bring up a subject that kind of relates both to the sculpture here as well as Therizinosaurus itself, it's kind of been up for debate, I'm not sure. I think it's been found with 4 toes, so that's why I kind of did the oversized dew claw, mainly for balance purposes. Now it's time for a build rundown. So basically this is a point where I usually just kind of give a overall description of what actually took place during the building process, and I figured I may as well do that considering there is no commentary whatsoever about, well, building the Therizinosaurus, just a bunch of, well, cool facts about it. But I'm a dinosaur nerd, so I kind of have to let that stuff out at some point. So basically what was finished here is the overall frame for this Armature doll. Now there's a few little things that I'm going to obviously add to for next time. It still needs a jaw, but unfortunately I had to work this Sunday, so I just didn't have as much time to sculpt as I would have liked. And there's a few other parts on the skeleton that I should probably touch up that I noticed are starting to stress crack just a little bit, and well, to avoid future repairs, let's fix that before it gets a bunch of layers of plasticine on it. And the list of building materials used for this part of the project so far is aluminum foil, oven-baked clay, armature wire made out of aluminum, and, well, some plasticine just to kind of make sure he holds himself up and, well, put some arms in cool positions for, well, a little bit of a beauty shot here. Now, this is part 1 of the Therizinosaurus. I'm hoping to have this little guy done next week and perhaps work on some other new projects where I'm going to definitely add some feathers. So I'm basically really looking forward to that. And if you'd like to see some more of my dinosaur content, be sure to check out the links below. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you made it this far in the video, be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new. Anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy.